All right, what's going on there, fellas? We're gonna see how this works out, but I got one of those fancy little mics that I can keep on my hat or on my collar. So hopefully both the audio and the video quality is going to be noticeably improved. You guys can let me know if that actually worked. But you're joining me for a deadlift session. It's my first of two for the week. We are on the second week of the training cycle. Hopefully, at the end of the training cycle, we'll be going for an 840-pound deadlift for a new PR. My current PR being 835. Nothing too exciting. I put up a little poll in the community section where you guys can voice your thoughts, or you can throw it down in the comments. What do you think about today's video format, where I'm going to talk to you between sets while I'm going through the session, versus what we did yesterday, where I voiced over the session in post. You guys can let me know what you think either way. I'll probably do both, at least now and then, for the sake of variety, keep things fun. But at the same time, if you guys express a preference, we can definitely skew a little heavier towards that, because my training, just as the sun will rise in the morning, I'm following the program. So I can't customize that to be interesting, but I can fiddle with the video formats from like an entertainment perspective. Yeah, that's the plan. We're gonna finish up our little slow warm-up walk, just trying to get the hip flexors stretched out, get the glutes moving a little bit, and then I'm gonna, let's see, I think I'm gonna do my my sit-ups today before my deadlifts. I just like having a little bit of an ab pump. It feels better when I go to pull. My abs are a little pre-exhausted. It's not the pre-exhaust that matters. I just find I have a little better mind-muscle connection after I do my ab stuff. My brace gets a little bit better. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna do the sit-ups that I would normally do towards the end of the session, superset those with stretching out my hip flexors and doing a little bit of like low-scale glute stuff. Because if I do that, my back doesn't pump up too bad when I'm doing deadlift volume, which is a big issue I have, and I'm sure I'll bitch about that a little bit later. So let's get into it. So I've talked a lot on the channel about why I like to do the abs before my lower days a lot of the time. Haven't talked about it in a while, got some new viewers. So honestly, the first and foremost reason, aside from the fact that I think for a lot of athletes, it can just help them establish a little bit better control of their abs, and then implement better bracing, because bracing is a skill. It's not just how strong are your abs, because I know guys with very, very strong abs that lift like someone with a weak midsection because they're not very skilled at the task of bracing. And I know guys who couldn't do a very heavy weighted sit-up, can't do that many hanging leg raises, but because they're very skilled at the task of bracing, certainly lift like someone with a very, very strong trunk. So there's that mind-muscle connection element of it. And then the other part is, as a coach, I see a lot of athletes skip their abs if you put them at the end. Do them at the beginning, at least they'll get done. And you can see whether you're someone that sees benefit from direct midsection training, because lots of guys don't see the benefit from it, but they've also never tried it. Some athletes have tried it and concluded it's just not worth the extra training time. And then others, when they finally started putting it at the beginning, did it consistently, realized huge benefits. So it's part of the reason I like doing it at the beginning. Lets me focus on it, prepares me well to lift. I can work reasonably hard on a couple sets of abs. It does not take away from my ability to deadlift. And if it did, I'd be pretty screwed at a strongman show if the deadlift wasn't the first event. So my capacity for work needs to be decent at least. Okay, and while I do the boring stuff, I can talk you guys through a bit of my thought process for warming up. It's good that it's become like a common talking point to talk about how like specificity applies to a warm-up. The best way to get ready for any given task is to do that task at a lower intensity. So the best way to warm up for benching is light bench pressing. Maybe you take the bar for a couple of sets, add a little weight, add a little weight, add a little weight. And that's kind of the base that we build from. Dr. Mike has been a very big proponent of this. But when we start getting into like, performance training rather than training for bodybuilding. Same thing could apply to bodybuilding, but it's a little bit more concrete for performance training. We start with that base of specificity, but if there are small things that we can do that are going to make our specific training go better, they're probably worth doing. Now, we don't need to do everything under the sun. It doesn't need to be some like squat U style warm up where we need to activate our feet and then activate our glute medius and then make sure our alignment is perfect and roll out our feet. It doesn't need to be this endless list of things, right? We have our base, which is the specific warm up, which today, for example, would be just taking the bar for some like deadlifts, adding some weight, adding some weight, adding some weight, adding some weight. And that's our base. And if you've got specific things that you benefit from addressing, then we add those onto the base, but we don't need to address things that are non-issues, right? So on the bench press early in the training cycle, I can warm up with more or less just some benching. Maybe I'll do some couch stretch to help get my hip into extension because I am a heels up bench presser, and that's a helpful position for not killing my lower back if I could kind of get this hip into extension a little bit. Maybe I'll roll out my T-spine, maybe do some light pulling to get some blood flow to my upper back, get a little bit better mind-muscle connection. But for the most part, I can just start working up, maybe take the bar, 20, 30 reps, start adding weight and go up on the bench press. Maybe later in the training cycle when I'm carrying more fatigue and my body is a little bit slower to get warm, I'll do a little bit more of a general warm-up, right? I might be doing things like lots of pulling beforehand, some dumbbell benching, some press downs, a more general whole body warm-up when my body's a little bit slower to warm up. And part of that's because of the purpose of that phase of training is to do some really good, heavy benches. And if I can do work before my top set that's going to make my bench presses higher quality, I'm better facilitating the goal of that phase. Whereas early in the training cycle, I'm trying to put in volume, really. So I might warm up a little bit more later in the training cycle. But when it comes to the deadlift, okay, I've got my base specific warm up. I choose to do my abs at the beginning, which isn't necessarily part of my warm up. It's just exercise ordering preference that I recommend people at least try. But the thing that I need to do, in addition to my specific warming up on the shit that I'm going to be doing for the day, is I need to stretch out my hip flexors and then do a little bit of like low scale glute stuff. Glute activation probably isn't the best term. It's probably been shit on rightfully because, when you say your glutes aren't firing, you'd have a very hard time standing upright if they weren't firing, right? But we could phrase that a little bit more intelligently and say, maybe these people that observe some benefit to this, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say, yeah, their terminology was off, but they were noticing a real benefit. We might say that a bench presser isn't utilizing their triceps as effectively as they could, right? Their intramuscular coordination could be better. You could maybe make the same argument that, yeah, you don't have sleepy glutes. Yeah, you probably don't have gluteal amnesia, but you might be able to use your glutes more effectively in your deadlift, and that would better distribute the task between the primary movers, right? Because like I said, in a bench press, that wouldn't be unreasonable to say. Wouldn't be unreasonable to say you're not utilizing your quads as best you can on your squat. And to move a lot of weight, we want to distribute the task between as many primary movers as we can. So following that same line of speaking, maybe we don't use the term activate, but I do think I don't utilize my glutes as effectively as I could in my pull. So doing a little bit of low scale stuff to establish a mind muscle connection and then applying deliberate cueing, right? Because we always take a two-pronged approach to fixing a perceived error like this, right? Prong one is like smaller scale accessory stuff to address it. But prong two, and the more important one, is cueing it, right? So it's like if your knees are coming in on your squats, let's say, sure, we could include some unilateral squatting movement, a little bit of extra glute movement, like stuff with a wider stance, belt squats with a tempo, which are all going to help you develop the musculature to resist your knees caving. But nothing is going to develop the musculature that resists your knees caving, like doing a bunch of squats, really fighting that and cueing it aggressively. And those muscles will get stronger by doing not just squats, but squats where we're cueing the desired result, right? So two-pronged approach. This is just something that if I don't do it, even with my aggressive cueing, my back tends to pump up a little bit. So I usually just do a little bit of a lunge stretch, a little bit of a couch stretch, some split squats, some hip thrusts, maybe some like abduction type stuff. And then I get into my deadlifting. I like warming up for the deadlift with a little bit of rows, a little bit of RDLs, and then just start doing my sets. So probably from the time I finished my cardio to the time that I'm deadlifting It only takes me about 10 minutes, so not really excessive, and I find that 10 minutes is very much worth it because I'm a lot more comfortable doing the deadlifts. I'm not cramping up between sets, and the quality of work ends up being higher. So thus, I can like conclude it's a worthwhile investment, even though the 10 minutes probably isn't real training. Hey. Intra-workout jug of peace. Gotta buy some intra-workout carb of some sort. I've done all kinds of intra-workout carbs through my training history, just as someone who's struggled to put on weight. Started lifting when I was like 5'10", about $140. Put on 100 pounds now, but it's always been very difficult. Had to force feed a lot, and intra-workout was just always a big window because I liked training for a while. Especially back in the day when my workouts would be like 8-9 exercises long, it would just be a lot of time without food. So I even dabbled with like eating dried fruit intra-workout, Rice Krispie treats, different liquid calories, anything from dextrose powder, Gatorade, which has dextrose in it, waxy maize, fruit juice, orange juice. I've tried a lot of different things. Don't really have a super strong preference. I always found that Gatorade with some extra salt and creatine always treated me pretty good, but I got to add in some kind of intra-workout carb again. Now that I'm trying to bulk up towards that 270, 275 range in my quest for a 600 bench press. To make that go quicker, it just wouldn't make sense to not have any calories in the intra window. So I'll have to pick what I'm going to do. Probably just going to go with Gatorade powder because it's tried and true, and it's a lot cheaper than buying things of Gatorade. All right, no bullying me. Straps go on early because it's technical practice. The grip for strongman isn't really tested on the deadlift. It's tested via other events like holds and farmers and such. So the deadlift just isn't a grip event. That's kind of how the meta is evolved. It's kind of arbitrary. The initial argument was like, oh, it's a risk of bicep tear. And I only find that to be very much the case when someone's bouncing between pulling in straps and pulling mixed grip. And so they'll do a lot of pulling in straps, lots of overhand pulling. They kind of lose that ability to externally rotate here. The external rotation comes from here, boom, pow, snap. But I find that athletes that always train mixed grip tend to be okay. If all the preparation is done on the specific movement, the relevant tissue tends to be ready. That's why I'm not too worried about max. It's when you start mixing and matching, which is what strongman was doing for a little bit, it's perceived as very dangerous. And that kind of shift in the meta happened, which I'm fine with. We can test our grip elsewhere. It's supposed to be a test of maximal back and posterior chain and leg strength. That's fine with me. But because the deadlift is a test of not grip, I don't really work my grip when I'm deadlifting. I work it elsewhere right now. I've pulled like 8 plates bare hand. I definitely want to update that at some point. But right now, sports specificity and whatnot. I also think part of the reason the meta became straps is so that they can flex numbers bigger than powerlifters, because I think it's important to maintain this perception that the strongmen are the strongest at everything, which is why I think like suits were allowed at the squat at the Arnold, because they didn't want this visual of, oh, well, powerlifters do more. Well, of course they do more. They're only supposed to be good at 3 things, and they're very, very good at those things. But I think that's like, they don't like the optic of that, so they don't want to do events that are contested by specialists. So they're not doing like a barbell clean to overhead max and strongman very often, because it would look bad compared to weightlifters. And that's fine because they're specialized athletes. Whereas strongmen are very, like, have to be well-rounded and train like 40 different events, and that's fine. But I think it's like a perception thing. It's a little bit of why we stay in the suits. Not that I own a suit, because I'm cool and I'm going to die on my moral high ground. All right. Very cool. Very cool. So while I rest for a second, a question that often comes up in my comment section, and I'm in the comment section of people a lot stronger than me, is people will ask, hey, what do you think about while you deadlift? They'll be like, oh, Jamal, what do you think about when you deadlift? Or, oh, Julius, what do you think about when you bench press? And the problem with that question is because that's an ever-evolving process. They have things that they thought about in the past and thought about it a lot until it became second nature. And then they stopped thinking about it. What someone is thinking about when they deadlift usually is whatever they're currently working on, whatever they've identified as an area for improvement. And that's all it's telling you. It's not the trick to deadlift like Jamal to think about what Jamal's thinking about. You have to take into context all the things he worked on in the past, right? So it's not always the best question to ask, what is someone thinking about when they deadlift? You say, well, how would you, what should I work on based on my pull? All right, well, there was my rest timer. Don't know exactly where that went off, but the question might be, what do I need to work on? Or what did you work on in the past? Or what do you identify to be the key components to a deadlift, right? So just something I thought about, right? And that's why it's sometimes better. Just because someone is an elite lifter does not mean they're an elite coach. I think most people know that nowadays. A lot of people are where they are, despite some of the things they're doing, not because of it, or they're so genetically gifted, they never ran into some of the problems you're running into. Check, check. Both of those make sense. And maybe they've got a very high lifting IQ as an athlete, right? For them specifically, they know exactly what they need to do. And my brother falls into this category. Max is a very intelligent guy, a lot more smart than he lets on. And he's got a very high athlete's IQ. Max has got a tremendous feel from 10 years of experience, what he as a powerlifter needs to do to keep getting better. And he's kind of always thinking about what he needs to do. And that's kind of the difference between a high-level coach is constantly thinking about what their athletes need to do, and high-level athletes think about what they need to do. And that's why I'm totally fine with some of these coaches that don't take their training super seriously. They're not trying to push themselves to the limit, because it's almost like you have to pick one or the other. If you're going to hyper obsess about your own lifting, that is going to take away a bit from your amount of focus on your athletes, right? And vice versa. So to truly be the best coach in the world, presumably one needs to be kind of past their own maximizing of their lifting, in my personal opinion. That being said, there are also very good athletes that are very good coaches, and they're very smart, and their cues, they've observed, okay, well, this is what worked for me, but this other thing works for other people. So there are some great athletes that are also great coaches. Just because you've got good genetics doesn't mean you're automatically a moron, and you could observe what works for your clients. But that's why it's good to ask the ones that do a bit of coaching, not just their own personal success sometimes, because they're just going to tell you, well, this is what worked for me, with a lot of nuance, a lot of detail, and there's things if you come in knowing that's what works for them, but I can learn from this and I can parse what parts might apply to me, awesome. Don't come in expecting it to be like verbatim. You'd probably be better off asking someone who does coaching to get a gist of what works for most people. So I got a couple things I'm working on today. Keeping the bar in close is a perpetual thing I'm working on. Doing a lot of rowing to strengthen the muscles that keep the bar in close. So we'll do that afterward. Breathing, not up into my chest, breathing as low as I can, trying to breathe into the obliques. If you're a newer lifter, I know this idea of 360 breathing and breathe into your obliques, breathe into your lower back sounds really abstract and daunting, but the more you practice, the more it'll make sense and it'll become less and less daunting. And it's made a tremendous difference in my ability to do more deadlifting volume than I could in the past, which I will touch on in a moment after I pick this up, probably twice. Shh, shh, shh. Come on, Sam. Big air. So keeping the bar in close, quality brace. And then the other thing I'm working on, muscularly, is working on a bit more hinging after this. I'm going to do some RDLs on the belt squat, just because they're fun. Could be normal RDLs. To get some length back to my hamstrings. Muscularly, that's something I'm working on. Been a bit too reliant on my erectors as primary movers. Need to catch up the hamstrings in a pure hinge pattern. But the other thing I'm working on is something that Martine's does that I really, really like. Martine's deadlift is absolutely beautiful. And he breaks the deadlift into two parts. He says up to the knee is a squat. He says some front squat sometimes, just a squat in general other times. So you're going here to here. Back angle stays relatively constant. We're not pulling upright. We're not being pulled forward. We drive up to the knee, maintaining a constant angle. Because our desire is to maintain a constant torso angle, most people would tell you that look, point, and head position should reflect the rest of your torso angle. So what he does is he doesn't move his look point until the latter half of the pull, where he says the top half is an RDL, it's a hip hinge. So what I've been working on is a variable look point. I'm looking, God, I don't know, 8 feet out of, ahead of me on the floor, driving up to, I get to the knees, maintaining a constant torso position. And then once I'm passing the knee, I then allow my gaze to rise to a straightforward position. Because the problem is and I've done this most of my lifting career, to be fair, because it feels very good with light weights. If we leave the eyes down here and we keep going, it's very efficient, but we start getting a really shitty lockout. We start wedging the hips through, and we're not gonna be able to get the shoulders back, because by keeping this down, we're kind of squishing through our upper back, and we're not gonna be able to effectively utilize our hinging musculature like we could if that look point came forward. Now, there's some very good lifters that leave it down, and that works well for them, but for most, I like having that variable look point. All right, my rest timer has been started. You guys can let me know what you think of this video format with all the chit-chatting. A while ago, I got a comment that made me chuckle pretty hard. It was some older fella commented on my lifting vlog, and he goes, "How about you shut up and train?" Well, first of all, I have to take rest times. Second of all, you click the lifting vlog. Third of all, you bench like 250. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I have a sneaking suspicion in the past 10 years, I have done a lot more shutting up and training than you have. But I like to make videos now and then. That being said, I hate talking this much while I'm training. Aside from the point that I've always trained alone. I'm not much of a chit-chatter while I train. It takes away from my focus, because really, I don't want to be the best content creator to ever live. I want to be a damn good lifter. I want to be really strong. And my training and focus need to reflect that. But I don't mind doing these now and then to walk you guys through my kind of mid-training thought processes, if you like them. If you don't like them, I think one of the guys I coach in the Discord said he prefers the voiceovers because I'm not winded and I can organize my thoughts a little bit better, whereas I'm a little bit more scatterbrained while I'm training. Someone else said they feel it's real. So you guys can let me know what you think after you watch this one. Hopefully the audio quality will be better than usual. You guys can let me know. Also, god damn, I'm tired of getting bullied for being winded. I'm in the middle of a workout. And it's always some dude's like, I'm not winded during my workouts. That's a self-report. You train like a bitch. I'm sorry, but that's not good. Or they'll be like, well, I train pretty hard. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not trying to be an asshole here, but if my sets of 8 are 500 pounds and your sets of 8 are 300 pounds, it creates a little bit more of an oxygen debt. I'm in, I would say, pretty good shape for a 260-pound man. Now, am I in good shape for a 180-pound man? Hell no. I'm not delusional. Having been someone who's in very good shape for boxing, I know I'm a ways off of truly being like in fight shape, if you want to go with that, or just truly, truly cardiovascularly fit. But I think if you put on a 100-pound weight vest, I'm doing better than you would be. Hopefully, maybe. I don't know. But stop bullying me. That was not very good. All right, we're done. We're done with the warm-ups. Time to train. Maybe a little bit less chit-chatting. My goal for the day is 545 pounds for 3 sets of 7. That sounds pretty shit for a 835 deadlifter, and that's because it is. Because I've got short arms, a long torso, and historically a bad brace, deadlifting has been very fatiguing for me. So I built up my deadlift strength by using a lower volume, higher intensity training routine, where I would do very few sets per week at a very high intensity, intensity meaning proximity to failure or load, and then filled in the missing volume with a lot of assistance work. Now I've gotten to the point to get better. My training specificity needs to rise a little bit, and I need to put myself through the fire and train while I'm heavily fatigued. Even if the lift is fatiguing for me, I've made my best technical gains on the bench press, on the deadlift, and on the squat while doing it in a fatigued state, rather than waiting until I'm fatigued, like completely unfatigued, to rip into the weight again and rely on my strength. If I come in a little bit pre-fatigued in the primary movers, I subconsciously understand that I need to be really efficient. I need to brace well, or my back's not going to feel so good. So I could probably take this for like 15, if I were to guess, on the first set. But by the third set, it's not going to be so easy. I could probably do, I want to say a 3x7. I could do definitely more than 100 pounds more than this for 7, and I have. I think at my best, something like 655 for 7 would be a good set, would be a PR, or match my PR. But the having to repeat the set, even with like 5-minute rests, is very, very difficult for me. But that's where the gains are going to come. Not super exciting, not super impressive, but it's been very effective for me to be pulling twice a week for straight sets. And then I get to transition back into my beloved less sets, go hard type shit. I have something impressive to post in, I think, 3 more weeks. And then we get into the cool shit again. Hopefully, if you guys are liking these hypertrophy phase ones, the strength phase ones are going to be a lot better, because I start bringing more adrenaline, start getting fired up, start doing lifts that I think are impressive and I'm a little scared about. I can document my preparation for each one in terms of like my food preparation, hydration, mobility, that kind of thing. Because right now it's just about logging the work, but each individual session starts increasing in priority once the stuff gets heavier, whereas right now it's more about the cumulative workload. Thus, the fact that I'm pulling, I think, 545 today and 565 on Friday. So it's about the cumulative, like I said, we're building volume. Big air, waiting close. Easy. Easy, Sam. Whoosh. Okay, not bad. Okie dokie, 5 minutes on the clock for rest. If I was training for powerlifting, one thing you can do when you start getting to these like bigger absolute loads is, you'll see some very, very strong deadlifters move away from the traditional hypertrophy phases. They move away from this idea of accumulating volume because they find that deadlift volume is like uniquely fatiguing for limited benefit. One of the best deadlifters I've ever met, Nate Alexander, used to go to my gym. He was a former American record holder in the USAPL for the deadlift in the 120 kg class. He pulled, I think, like 830 on the stiff bar, 825, 830, something like that. Nate is one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Dude's my hero. I love Nate. Really look up to that guy. He would get off of his very physical job after working a 10-hour day and then come pull heavy 3 days a week for low volume. And that was kind of his thing. He's very Bulgarian influenced. And I talked to him about it. And part of that was because before he was a USAPL powerlifter, he was doing natural bodybuilding. So he had done this big base of volume. He's a huge dude, very, very, very jacked, tons of muscle on his frame. So he's like, okay, well, it's probably not what I need to do to get better. I need to probably train lower volumes more frequently, right? You got the whole triangle of volume, intensity, frequency. He wanted the intensity high, the frequency high, the volume low. And he found that his body got way less banged up that way. So his whole thing was coming in and working up to heavy 1 to 3 multiple times a week. And a lot of it was, he just said that when I do more than 5 reps in the deadlift, it's just so disproportionately fatiguing. I don't think the benefit outweighs the fatigue. And I've talked to many very strong deadlifters passing that like mid 7 to 800 range. And I definitely see the volume come down. You see a lot of guys start moving to the pull heavy every other week frequency. A little bit different sumo because it's a little bit less systemically taxing with the torso being more upright and more of the leg demand being on the legs. It seems to be the really heavy axial loading that's like the big crux of why it's so holistically fatiguing. So if you've got a very efficient sumo where you're leveraging really upright, it definitely seems like you can handle a good bit more volume in those same really heavy weight ranges. But that's something I always considered, and it's something we've implemented with Max. We're not ever really doing hard sets of 8. We kind of cap our volume accumulation with sets of 5. And that's worked very well for Max to train for heavier and heavier singles. Max is a phenomenal deadlifter. But for strongman, I got to be good at reps too. So I can't avoid it, unfortunately, because it's something that I'm going to be asked to do, and I can't afford to be bad at it. So I use more of a volume accumulation model where I will take my reps to as high as 10, which we don't do with Max and we do with me. So a little difference there. I definitely want to do another video where I have Kirsten here to film for me again, because that was very nice. Because I prefer not talking when I train, but when I'm doing it myself, I worry. I'm like, oh, am I talking to the camera enough? Is it going to be an interesting video? Blah, blah, blah. So I end up talking a lot more than I would want to. Whereas when Kirsten was here to ask me just relevant questions, I was able to train more like I would normally do without you guys here and just peek up for a second, answer whatever she had as a logical question about like, why are you doing what you're doing? I really like that, but her work schedule been very busy. She works at a biotech company, which is cool, but she works too much. All right, 7 again. I got to squat into the first rep just a tad more. Come on, Sam. Easy work. Big brace. Waiting close. Squat into it. Come on, Sam. Shh. Make it look easy. Whoosh. Hammies need work. All right, about 2 minutes left on the rest timer before the final set. They look fast, I'm sure, but they're starting to break down a little bit. I've always been a very explosive guy, which was much to my benefit in boxing. People say it's really to your benefit in powerlifting, but there's no time component. I know phenomenal lifters that never move anything that quickly. You know, their RPE8's kind of slow, and their maximal strength is great. So I don't know if explosiveness is for powerlifting all that important. It comes into play sometimes in strongman, which I like, because at least I could use that to my advantage. But it's always been that way where it's same thing with Max. It's fast and it doesn't move, or I stick halfway up. Same with Max. So everybody's like, it's sub 6. Promise you it wasn't. Somebody told me like I did when I posted my 545 pin press a couple weeks back. Somebody in the Discord goes, Sam, why are you training at like RPE 6? And then I failed the next week at like 565. So definitely a little misleading there. I just saw the results of my YouTube poll, and apparently most people prefer the voiceover in post. And I'm only now seeing this now that I'm like halfway into a training while I'm talking in between. Maybe this video will change your guys' mind. Maybe it won't. We'll see. My low back is already very fatigued, but that's what it's supposed to be, because then I'm going to have to hopefully do a slightly better job on this one, using my hamstrings effectively, using my glutes effectively, and bracing, keeping the weight in close, and using everything other than the low back. So I don't want to rest more than my allotted time, but really quick, a lot of time people get this wrong. If your low back is all that's sore after deadlifts, a lot of people come to the conclusion, oh, my low back must be weak. It's the only thing that's sore. And it's like sometimes it's the exact opposite. Your low back is the strongest part of your body, so you're asking it to do too much of the work. And it's like, how do you make your low back less sore? Get your hamstrings stronger, get your glutes stronger so you can use your pure hip hinge rather than using your back as a primary mover. Get your lats stronger so you can keep the weight in closer. Get your brace better. And it's like, ask those other things to do more. And that's been the story of my lifting career. Low back's fried, fatigue's real quick, because I could use those other things more effectively. And it's why in my assistance work today, it's going to be a quick workout because we're pulling twice a week. So a little bit less assistance work per session. You're going to see some rows, pretty basic. Don't need an explanation there. Wish they were dumbbell rows because dumbbell rows are my favorite and make me feel strong. But right now we're doing barbell rows twice a week because that's what the program says. And then we're going to do some RDLs. Going to do the RDLs in the belt squat for fun. But you can kind of see not much for the low back directly there. It's really supposed to be strengthening below the low back and above the low back to catch those up to par so my low back takes less of a beating. Oh. Also, I appreciate you fellas saying in the poll you want to see whatever's easiest for me because you guys watch whatever I put out. And I'm trying to get the channel bigger now because I've never really cared about, I make like $20 a month off of it. I don't really care about that. But I realized if my channel gets bigger, then maybe eventually we could get to the point where Kirsten's job is the YouTube channel and I'll continue coaching. So she could be less constantly sleep deprived. So that's gave me a little bit of motivation. I don't mind working the long hours myself, but if Kirsty could work a little bit less, I'd be very happy. So I'm like, yeah, got to go big on the YouTube. So I'm trying to put a little bit more effort into making them a little bit more fun. So we'll see. Come on. Got to beat max to 880. Let's do this. Short arms be damned. Come on, Sam. Come on, Sam. Easy work. Good brace. Weight in close. Drag it up the leg. Come on. Come on, Sam. Whoosh. Whoosh. Come on, Sam. Easy work. Whoosh.